欢迎大家来到羊兄咖啡店，就让我来带大家一起去聊时事吧。Hello， 大家好，欢迎大家又回到了羊兄饮茶啦。今天羊兄我呢非常有幸请到一个非常特别的嘉宾啊，他算是我的同学吧，他是在剑桥目前读书的。他的一个非常有趣的一个故事就是说，他的家人是来自索马里的，然后他是在丹麦出生的，然后他在英国长大的。然后作为一位黑人朋友呢，他目前在剑桥大学也是我觉得成绩也是很标青的。他是读第4年的这个工程系啦，他有很多的经验，我觉得可以跟大家分享，就包括身为一名黑人在英国长大的经验他对政治的看法，还有他对他身边的一些人事物的分享我希望这期视频可以跟大家好好去做介绍首先我们先欢迎我们的朋友 Khalid。
嗨。
Khalid 呢就是今天我们的嘉宾啦所以接下来我们就直接进入今天采访的重点吧。Hi Khalid, so I think first of all welcome to the program. Thank you for accepting my interview, and because I think my audience will be very interested in knowing about your experience being a black person in the UK, because my audience, when they read about newspaper in the West, they always talk about black is being discriminated and people sometimes violence against them, right? So I'm just curious, for you, what is your experience growing up in Britain, and how do you feel about it being an ethnic minority, especially a black individual?
Yeah, so I grew up in Britain and lived my whole life here. I had my education here, and I'm one of like a very unique set of people where I haven't really experienced direct racial aggravation.
You haven't experienced direct racial discrimination?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know, it's interesting because I guess it's essentially the people I've surrounded myself with. I grew up in a very multicultural area of North London.
North London?
North London.
Okay.
I went to primary school there. I also went to secondary school there. And I went to secondary school in a grammar school. And I guess it was also multicultural, but then whilst I was there, I developed,
What do you mean by diverse? You mean like there are people from different nationalities and different ethnic groups, they grew up together? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
London's super multicultural.
Okay.
It's like a melting pot of different cultures, and North London isn't exclusive to that. And so that was super nice. And I guess that contributes to the fact that that's why I never really experienced direct racial discrimination, because I was surrounded by so many people that were just from so many different backgrounds.
Okay. So when you grew up means that when you were in the high school, it was diverse as well then? Yeah, so you didn't feel at any point that people discriminated against you, or you think you are being excluded from your friend groups? What do you think about that? Do you have any similar experience? Also no?
I would say no.
Oh, okay.
Because it must have happened, but I just never realized it to the point where it's like, hang on, am I being discriminated against? It's very interesting. I don't know how else to describe it. I was in a space where it wasn't obvious if it was happening at all.
Okay. Oh, that is so interesting, because a lot of people, when they look at the news, they will think that the black people are being discriminated, they are not giving a chance, and here you are, and you are not only given a chance, no, you are not only living in harmony with different people, and you don't really feel being discriminated upon, and now you got the chance to join Cambridge. Wow, that is so interesting. But when you look at recent news, right, when you look about news, and now the conservative government especially, they are talking about imposing a lot of restrictions on immigrants, especially towards a minority, and they are talking about the language of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism has failed, as you mentioned to me just now, and they are now going even more harder on this thing, right? Do you feel insecure about that?
I would say so. Growing up, there was a different government at the time, and
the Labour government, right?
The Labour government, exactly.
Okay.
And whilst I wasn't aware of the fact because I was so young, it definitely, looking back, felt like a different Britain. And then after, this transition to this conservative government in 2010, and things and then with the onset of Brexit, there's this umbrella of, no more multiculturalism. You know, it does give you some sense of insecurity that we're kind of taking steps backwards from what forward steps we took before. So yeah, I would feel it's like there is some sense of insecurity there, and like some anxiety of what could come in the future if we were to remain in this government, for example.
But you know, the Prime Minister is an ethnic minority. For the first time, I think, in British history, you got an Indian to become the Prime Minister. Does that not assure you of the Britain that you are envisioning, like a more open Britain, no?
It's paradoxical. Rishi Sunak himself is ethnically Indian, but he is fully British. He has grown up here, he's lived his whole life here, he's been educated here. And because of that, I don't really see him as being an ethnic minority first. I see his party politics before that. I see him as a conservative before anything else. And that's why I don't really see Rishi Sunak himself as a champion of multiculturalism and what he is a byproduct of, for example.
So based on the example of Rishi Sunak, as you mentioned, right? So do you think the problem in UK is more of a class problem or more of a race problem?
Definitely a class problem. I feel like class issues are more important here in the UK than they are in somewhere like, say, America, where racial problems are definitely like more pressing. It's harder. The act of social mobility, moving between different classes in the UK, has become more stagnant over the years, especially since 2010, when the Conservative government came into power. And a lot of things, I see it through a class lens before anything, before racial lens or whatnot.
Despite the racial rhetoric. So it's quite a lot of racial rhetoric, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of racial rhetoric, but there are undertones of class problems. Rishi Sunak himself, when you look at him, is exactly like counter to that racial argument. You know, he first and foremost comes from a higher class. He's in upper class. His social circles are, you know, other upper class people, and that's what kind of got him to the position he is in now. People don't really see him as an Indian man. You know, he is a British man who is part of the upper class in UK society.
That's interesting. So talking about class, I'm sure that class has been a major problem for Britain for a long time, but it appears that when we talk privately, you mentioned that when people speak different accent, actually you can infer their academic achievement, their standard, as well as their which class they are from within the social hierarchy, right? Could you explain more to our audience? Because my audience will be so interested in knowing about how this class system structure Britain and affects your social mobility.
Absolutely. So in the UK, there are a number of different classes, and it's like just another category for people to be binned into. So you have the working class. Below that, often you have the lower class as well, and above working class you've got middle class, and then yet above that is the upper class, and then even above that is aristocratic,
the king, the royalty, the aristocracy,
because that's still an institution that exists in the UK to this day. But in modern conversations, the main discussion is around working class, lower class, middle class, and often when you speak to other people from different classes, you can sort of tell from someone's voice what sort of class they belong to. And it's a weird phenomenon. You just have to be in it to understand it and believe it. And a lot of people like to say that the higher class you are in, the more educated you are, the more refined or so that you speak. And I come from, like a lower class family, growing up in North London, the children of immigrants, right? And when people hear my voice, they often hear me as sounding super educated, right? Because I sound posher than what I'm supposed to. And often that makes people think I belong to a higher class than I actually do. But it's, again, another paradoxical thing. It's the opposite. It's a weird phenomenon I've noticed in the UK, and a lot of people can relate to it.
So when you speak, so right now, the way you are speaking, when people don't look at you, they will think you are a white man.
Definitely. I've had that said to me before. If someone has listened to a recording of my speech, they would have thought I was a white person.
But how did you pick up this accent then?
So that's something I've questioned myself. I probably think it's attributed to the fact that I went to a grammar school.
Okay. What is a grammar school?
A grammar school is another type of secondary school in the UK. It's not often they are private schools, but I went to
Government funded
a
school.
normal state-funded grammar school, and you have to do a test to get in.
So
when
like
you're
a
11 years
high
old.
achieving school. So you have to pass a benchmark.
Yes,
Then only you can be admitted to the grammar school, right?
exactly.
Okay.
And often, you know, once you pass this test, like a lot of middle class, upper class families can access extra help to get their children into these classes, into these schools, and then that just stimulates, you know, like this sort of bubble around grammar schools of like higher class people and whatnot. I obviously don't come from that, and I managed to successfully get into my grammar secondary school. And I like to think that because I was surrounded by middle-class people for a large chunk of my life, in the formative years of my life, you know, going through puberty and all of that, that has added to the way I speak now. And when I've spoken to family friends who live in my area, who didn't go to my grammar school or anything, they've told me themselves I sound posh compared to them, even though I grew up under the same roof. And it does make me self-conscious of that fact.
Wow. So you talk about grammar school. You mentioned that your neighbor was quite diverse, right? And now you got to Cambridge. So do you think Cambridge is a diverse place in your opinion?
Cambridge is making the right steps towards being more diverse.
Okay.
But I think there's still a long, long way to go.
Still a long way to go.
Yeah.
Why? How do you perceive Cambridge right now?
So I think the right step in the direction to make the right step in is to increase the intake of more diverse backgrounds. There has to be like systemic things that need to be fixed in order to ensure people from lower classes are uplifted and there's social mobility. But at least for now, diversity is still a core issue here in Cambridge. When I look around, it does sound and feel like not the same place as where I grew up. Like, it doesn't emulate London to that extent.
But the Cambridge admitted you.
They did, yeah. And that's why I feel like this is a step in the right direction. You know, there aren't, for example, a lot of black people around in Cambridge. Not to say that you have to really look for them, but just looking around, you know, you won't immediately see like spaces occupied by a lot of black people like myself. And I am conscious of that fact. It is something I've noticed.
This is so interesting because from my perspective, I will see there are many more international students. I will see that Cambridge is more diverse because when I look around me, the way I see it is like when I put on my own lens, I see a different picture. But when I step into your shoes and to put on your lens, then you can see a different picture. So that says a lot about, you know, the importance of having conversation to understand each other, right? Especially when we talk about multiculturalism, are we really talking about it, isn't it? Yeah. So, you know, talking about your background, you're so interesting. You mentioned to me that your parents are from Somalia, right? So why did they move out of Somalia?
So my family moved out of Somalia just before the civil war started.
Just because of the civil war?
Yeah, they weren't in the country when it began. They were elsewhere.
Oh.
And then the civil war happened, the government collapsed, and
Oh no.
there wasn't really like a need to go back because like the institution just collapsed. So my family moved to Denmark, where I already had family there, and made a life for themselves. We stayed over with family and whatnot. My two older brothers and myself were born there. I'm a Danish citizen technically.
But it doesn't affect your status in the UK, right?
No.
Okay.
Not in the slightest. But yeah, we lived in Denmark. As soon as I turned 1, we essentially moved over to the UK. So whilst I don't remember my time much in Denmark, I was technically born there, and I'm a Danish citizen for that reason.
So let me just ask you a crucial question. I think a lot of people will be interested in knowing. So do you feel as a Danish, or do you feel more as a British?
Definitely British.
Despite moving around, despite your family background, you still think you identify yourself more with Britain?
Culturally, I feel very British. I want to live and work here for my whole life. I want to raise a family here. I can understand Somali, but I speak it in a very broken way. I want my kids to grow up here and live here. And I do consider this my home country, really.
But you know now the situation, as mentioned just now, is looking bad, especially for the immigrants or people who look different from white, because you mentioned about white Britain was their, what they were championing and that kind of things. Are you not worried about this future?
It is worrying. It does feel like a lot of the progress that was made in the past, we're making steps backwards. And whilst I feel fully integrated, one thing that does have me concerned is people who can emulate my parents' story.
You can emulate your story as well.
Exactly.
In Cambridge.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a proof that multiculturalism can work. My family, my parents are immigrants. I'm a child of a pair of immigrants. Yeah, I could still have a more or less successful story, whatever that means. And it does sound scary thinking that pathway can close for a lot of people, because who knows whose children out there, children of immigrants, could also come to Cambridge or anywhere in the UK and develop their own success stories.
So, what do you think next year election is going to be?
I think people are very tired of the current government. It's been 13 years of austerity, and opinion polls all suggest that it is essentially the prospects of a Conservative government is dead in the water. So I think a Labour government is due, and it is coming.
Do you think they will provide a better future for people like you?
I'm hopeful. I think it's definitely the right step to take. The policies that Labour has could not be further from, regarding immigration, could not be further from the Tory government. So I think I'm hopeful. We'll just have to see, because I could end up disappointed, but I could also end up.
But right now you're hopeful for the future.
I'm hopeful.
For Britain as well.
Yes.
Okay, and that's the end of the interview. Thank you so much, Khalid.
Thank you so much for having me.
首先，谢谢大家能够看到今天的采访。我觉得今天这个采访非常有意义啊，就是像卡利这么样的人呢，其实虽然说他现在不满意现在的时局，但是他是一个曾经英国的这个产物啦，就是说他能够在这里成长，然后能够进到剑桥，然后很多机会呢，还是谢谢当初这个环境啊，他也希望未来呢，英国政府也不需要往回头路走了封闭自己，毕竟像他这样的人才能够留在这里，都能够有一席之地啦，然后贡献这个国家，因为他已经把英国当成是他的家了当然这个视频呢不知道大家有什么意见，都欢迎大家在下面分享你的看法哦到最后，请大家不要忘记给我一个支持，订阅、点赞，还有分享出去，因为大家的支持是对我最大的鼓励哦。Once again, thank you, Khalid.
Thank you so much.
我们下期再会，拜拜。